The Utah beach landings went to the wrong place. Well, that turned out to be good. Utah Beach in general was the easy beach. Not that easy though. Now, if you like the videos, you can help the channel in several ways. You can tap like here. You can tap subscribe plus the bell to be notified. You can also ask questions or pass comments. Now let's go and walk Utah Beach. If you haven't already seen them, you should watch the videos on the American Airborne. The 101st and the 82nd Airborne were the spearhead of the Utah Beach landings. All this land just behind Utah Beach was flooded. It was the 101st job to capture the high land inland of the floods. High, as in 50 foot. The marshes were at sea level. This was Utah Beach. It stretched from here at WN8, that's Widerstandsnest 8, to WN9, just over a mile away. WN8 had 2 troop shelters, this one for 15 men, and a double one over there for 30 men. The machine guns, mortars and anti-tank guns were on the dunes. This gun pit would be the same as the one at WN5, but it's filled with sand. And over there was a mortar Tobruk, and behind the bushes, more machine guns. But the troops didn't land here. They landed 1.5 miles away at WN5. This is a troop shelter on WN5, just a single room. So in that room there'd be up to 15 men could sleep in there. There'd be 5 columns of 3 bunks. And here was the Tobruk for the close protection. And there's a chimney for the stove they'd have for heating. There were 2 50mm guns like this in open gun pits. The other one has disappeared under the dunes. There was one 50mm gun in a casement. It's practically buried in the dunes. Near the museum was a mortar Tobruk, and over there a machine gun Tobruk. These are the Czech hedgehogs that the beaches were covered with. They're called Czech hedgehogs because the Czechs used them to try and keep out the Germans in '38. This is a replica of the Higgins boat made of metal. The original ones were made of wood, except the ramp. Each man had a place in the boat. The officer was in the front with the riflemen, then bazooka teams, mortar teams, engineers and the medics. Contrary to the British LCAs, the pilot was at the back. That left room to get a jeep in. The British LCAs were metal clad, which gave some protection but made them slower. The German officer here was called Lieutenant Janke, that's Janke, and he was 27. Now on the night of the 5th to the 6th, of course the paratroopers are landing, supposed to be landing the other side of the floods, but one plane dropped its men over here. The first 2 men out the plane landed on the beach, and the others went in the sea and drowned. So the 2 landed on the beach were captured by Janke, and they were held here at WN5, but they were asking to be taken inland because they knew what was going to happen. And so Lieutenant Janke came to the same conclusion, and he spent the night in a lookout post about where the museum is now, just behind the anti-tank wall. And early in the morning, Janke saw some bombers crossing the coast up there. They expected them to go inland to bomb. Well, they turned, came along the coast at 1,800 feet, and they bombed this place effectively. So practically everything was out of action. Now they were B-26 bombers, which are twin-engine medium bombers, flying at 1,800 feet, whereas on Omaha Beach, which is
10 miles over there, they used B-17s and B-24s, which are 4-engine heavy bombers flying at 10,000 feet. So that's why when the men came in here, they practically walked in. Now I believe there were 12 men killed in the attack against the strong point. Now that's not to say there's only 12 men killed on D-Day on Utah Beach. There was around 200 killed, over 500, 600 casualties. But actually attacking the strong point, 12 men were killed because it was practically out of action. Now the men were killed during the day because there were many mines in the sea, there were mines on the dunes. Breakout Manor, which is just 3 miles inland, was firing onto the beach until the band of brothers knocked it out. And there was a gun battery at Grand Camp over there with 6-inch guns, and they could fire right over here. So that's what killed men during the day. But the actual attack went pretty easy. Compare that with Omaha Beach, where there were 11 strong points. 1,000 men were killed taking those 11 strong points. Now the attack here on Utah Beach was led by General Roosevelt. He was a one-star general, a brigadier general. It was Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the son of Theodore Roosevelt, the president. Now, generals don't normally lead attacks, and General Barton, his commanding officer, didn't want him to come in, but he asked 3 times, and he gave the reason. He said, when the men are on the beach, important decisions need to be taken, so somebody should be there with the authority to take them. So that's why I should go. So finally, General Barton allowed him to come in. Now he thought that'd be the last time he saw him, but things weren't like on Omaha Beach, and they went pretty easy here. Now as soon as they landed, Roosevelt realized he was in the wrong place, and he realized that because that red roof chalet there, that was on the map they had, and that should have been on his left, because it was on his right. He realized he was in the wrong place, but he said, well, the war starts here, and he brought everybody in the wrong place, which was a very good idea because this was a better place than where they should have been, between WN8 and WN9. But they came to the wrong place for 3 reasons. One is the tide was coming in, so that causes a current along the coast because the tide comes in from the Atlantic over there into the channel. So the channel fills up with water, that causes a current. The wind was from the west, causing ships to come off course, and the floating tanks were coming in here, and whereas on Omaha Beach they all sunk except 2, most of them managed to get in here. But because of the 4-foot waves, they were going very slow, and so the landing craft bringing the men in overtook the tanks. They came to the left to avoid them, plus the current, plus the wind. They ended up here in the wrong place. So the tide is low now on Utah Beach as it was when they came in. They had 500 yards to run after spending 2 hours in the landing craft in 4-foot waves. Of course here it was very different to Omaha Beach, where on Omaha Beach it was strafed by 85 machine guns, 11 anti-tank guns. Here practically everything was out of action. The gun in here was the only gun in the casement, but the gun could only fire that way, and the men landed up there. So this is practically the only gun working due to the accurate bombing, but it could only fire that way and was useless. Now it's practically covered in the dunes. Of course on D-Day it would have had a clear view of fire from the opening, which is that way, and the dunes have moved about 15 yards in 75 years.
As most of the weapons here, this 50mm gun would have been out of action due to the accurate bombing.
The memorial with the gun has been built over this bunker. This bunker is where the men manning the anti-tank gun above us would sleep, and they locked themselves in on D-Day. Then the Americans would put in explosives by the door to blow it up, and the Germans inside heard what they were doing, and so they opened the door and they said, we don't want to fight, and they gave themselves up.
The landings had started at 6:30. The action advanced so quickly here that by 8:30 the engineers had cleared the beach of obstacles with bulldozers, and the anti-tank wall had been broken. The dunes now cover it by 15 yards. One man who landed here with Roosevelt was Captain Maybury. He was walking across the dunes when he saw 5 German soldiers. One had a grenade, so he shot him, and the other surrendered, which surprised him, as he was alone and they could have shot him. But they were looking behind him. He followed their gaze to see the horizon full of ships. The Germans called it the Black Ribbon. He handed his prisoners over to other men to take care of and continued across the dunes. He suddenly noticed a mine in the sand. He realised he had a choice of retracing his footsteps or carrying on. So he carried on. A mine went off, but he was extremely lucky. It just blew him off his feet. He got up and met up with his battalion. Their job was to open up exit number 1 towards Poupeville.
So this plaque commemorates the junction of the troops coming in from Utah Beach with the paratroopers of the 101st. Happened at 11 o'clock. Now the junction was made by Captain Maybury. He landed at Utah Beach, which is a mile and a half down that road. His job was to open up exit number 1, which is this. And they came along here, they had a tank with them. They came around this bend. They're just up there. There's a bridge over a little stream. And they saw 2 Germans on the bridge. Of course, the Germans saw them coming and ducked down under the bridge. And as they approached the bridge, there was firing coming at them from the other side of the bridge. In fact, it was the paratroopers. They saw a tank coming. They weren't sure whether it was German or American, so they fired at it. And Maybury held up an orange panel, which was a recognition signal. And so they joined up with the paratroopers. He was taken to see General Taylor, who was the commander of the 101st. And he could tell him that the landings were going ahead successfully on Utah Beach, which was good news for the paratroopers. Because if Utah Beach had gone wrong, they would have been completely isolated. So we're here at Ordeville-la-Hubert, and it's in this house that Lawton Collins and Roosevelt set up their headquarters on the 6th.
The 4th Division, landing on Utah Beach, had made good headway thanks to going to the wrong place and the actions of the Airborne. They'd met up with 101st, but getting to Semeriglise would happen tomorrow. Advancing along the coast, they got to and took WN10. As well as an excellent museum, Utah Beach has many points of interest. These veteran handprints were inspired by the Polaroid photo frame. They were put up in 2014 and had to clear the dunes a bit to make room. The anti-tank wall was uncovered. The dunes have moved 15 yards in front of it. These figures and the replica Higgins boat were made in Nebraska. The Higgins boats were made in New Orleans, but Higgins came from Nebraska.
Now this bunker behind the Roosevelt restaurant was the German communications bunker on Utah Beach. From here they were connected by telephone and radio to Saint-Lô, which was General Marx's headquarters. Now after D-Day, the Americans took it over and they used it as their communications between the ships and the shore. Now after the war, the previous owner of the restaurant used this as a storeroom, so the walls were full of shells and wine and all sorts of stuff. And some years ago, some American veterans came back trying to find the bunker they'd been in. They're looking in bunkers along the beach and they couldn't find the one. And they came in the bar to have a drink and they said, "We're looking for a bunker." And the owner said, "Oh, I've got one at the back." And he brought them in and their names were on the wall. So they knew this was the one. Now, the 2 men that found it were Chagnon, number 1, and Acosta, number 8. And all these numbers with the signatures correspond to the numbers on the photos. You see they're all Navy men, because this was a Navy installation. See these tubes which used to make these electronic things work? They were then replaced by transistors in the 60s. And of course now we have millions of transistors in a microchip. So you've got the pin-ups of the day. There's Jean Crane, Dusty Anderson, Betty Grable, and Glenn Miller, who entertained the troops with his band. His plane disappeared over the channel. Mystery what happened, but it disappeared. See, the bunk is here for the man on duty to have a rest, because this was 24 hours a day. And the bunk is connected to the hook on the ceiling, so it can be unhooked and folded down. The bunk was built just behind the fisherman's hut as it was then, and the windows on it are painted by the Germans as camouflage, try and make it look like a house. The pre-war building just had one story, so since the war they've added a story to it, and now it's become a restaurant. It was a fisherman's hut before the war, and then the Germans used it as their offices for the people organising building the bunkers. The tank was given to Saint-Mary-de-Mont, because Utah Beach is part of Saint-Mary-de-Mont, by the French army just after the war, as well as the anti-aircraft gun. Saint-Mary-Église received the same gift, a tank and an anti-aircraft gun. The only problem with the tank is it's not the sort of tank that was used in Normandy. So this tank's got the big 76mm gun. These tanks were brought in later. Now Saint-Mary-Église, they exchanged their tank just last winter for a tank from Holland. So now they've got the right sort of tank that was used in Normandy. The section of anti-tank wall next to the tank was broken off the anti-tank wall, which is actually behind the museum, between the museum and the sea, of course, when they made that hangar, which is now holds a B-26, which is a type of airplane that bombed the beach.
This bunker under the 50mm gun was used by the Americans as the beach headquarters. When the door is open, you can see photos of Roosevelt, Admiral Moon and Meade Caffey, who commanded the 1st Engineers. Outside is a memorial plaque to Operation Tiger. That was a rehearsal for Utah Beach. They sailed in a curve from Poodle Harbour to attack Slapton Sands. Some German E-boats happened to come along and sunk 2 ships. 946 men drowned. As Operation Tiger was top secret, there was no memorial to the men who died. Meade Caffey decided that this bunker would be the memorial to the engineers who died. Their names are on the wall. This was another idea of Meade Caffey. The roads around Utah Beach were named after engineers who died on D-Day.
This memorial is to the 90th Division. On D-Day it was the 4th Division landed on Utah Beach. In the evening and the following days, the 90th Division came in. They were called the Tough Hombre. Now they had this monument made in Germany when they got there. And then it laid on the floor, and then it was taken to the American Cemetery near Omaha Beach, where it laid on the floor behind the office. Then it ended up here. So it's had quite a journey. Now these posts were put up in 1947 by the French government, and there's one every kilometre from here to Bastogne, and it's called the Liberty Way. Some people call it the Patton Way because it follows the route Patton took. Now there's one of these here, and there's one at Saint-Mary-Église, and so there's an argument about where it should start. So at Saint-Mary-Église they've got kilometre 0. So here they put kilometre 00, more 0 than Saint-Mary-Église. Now there's 5 of these marks, which represents the 5 different segments of the Liberty Way.
From the 7th of June, a gooseberry was installed in front of each beach. A gooseberry was a line of old ships sunk to form a wave break. That allowed LSTs to be unloaded on the beach up until November. 2 of the ships were filled with concrete. That's what those lumps are, visible at low tide. Thanks for watching to the end. If you like the video, you can give a thumbs up and tap on subscribe and the bell, of course, to be notified of new videos. If you want to help the channel even more, you can subscribe to my Patreon. The link is in the information. See you soon.